Video games are many things to many people. For some, they are simply an entertaining pastime. For others, a lifelong hobby. For others still, they are a career or a showcase of technical creativity and prowess. While they may be all of these things, occasionally a video game transcends its own medium and becomes an unforgettable, life-changing experience. Little did I know, as teenage me opened a Christmas package from my mother, Shenmue would be such a game. It started out as a Virtua Fighter RPG for the Sega Saturn, but soon gained its own identity. A project that Sega poured tens of millions of dollars into, Yu Suzuki's greatest masterwork, and Swangson's series of the Dreamcast that couldn't save the console from its untimely demise at the hands of an overwhelming opponent. For fans old enough to play it in its day, Shenmue was a groundbreaking, critically acclaimed title that many hailed unironically as a masterpiece. As the years rolled on, a cult following would grow around the series with fans so passionate about Shenmue 1 and 2 that Ryo Hazuki became recognizable as the main character in one of Sega's most cherished IPs. Shenmue had become sacred for many fans of Sega's Dreamcast console.
There's a lot of passion for Shenmue. Is anybody passionate about Shenmue out there?
Is there a way to cancel out passion? Like, could I just stand up here and say, like, look, don't make Shenmue. Can I put a stop to it?
It isn't a fun game.
Shenmue is dreadful. I don't think that's a particularly brave thing to say, but I believe I should get a medal for saying it anyway.
All the while, a countercurrent developed and spread across the internet consisting of games, journalists, and social media influencers contending that Shenmue had not aged well. Putting aside nostalgia and appraising the title by today's standards, they argue, leads to the conclusion that Shenmue is not a good game. What's more, the problematic development and publishing controversies swirling around the long-awaited sequel in this series, Shenmue 3, has caused a division in Shenmue's already niche fanbase. Outsiders unfamiliar with the series have used the negative attention garnered by the mixed reviews and fan reactions to Shenmue 3 to justify their claim that Shenmue was never good.
But now, we can definitely say that Shenmue was never good.
It's a forklift simulator for You people have been fooled. That game was never that good. It was just a bunch of half-assed ideas put together in a way that you had never seen before.
Worse still, content creators and commenters alike incorrectly equivocate Shenmue with the Yakuza series, ignorantly suggesting that Yakuza is the same type of game as Shenmue, only done better.
You know, all you Shenmue fans out there could have been playing Yakuza all this time, right? I mean, it's like Shenmue, but made by people who know what human happiness looks like.
Time and again, this series has been slapped down by detractors, only to rise miraculously from the grave with ports of the first two games on modern platforms and an all-new installment in the franchise. My purpose in making this video is not to call anyone out or try to pick fights, although I will use a few arguments made by certain journalists and influencers as examples in order to refute specific claims that I disagree with. No, my purpose is merely to put an honest attempt in setting the record straight by dispelling the misconceptions, invalid criticisms, and unfair slander surrounding Shenmue. To this end, I intend to refute several criticisms related to Shenmue's control scheme, primary gameplay, pacing, and game design. Most of all, my objective in this piece is to make the case why Shenmue was always good. Let's get into it.
Hi, this is Corey Marshall, the English voice actor for Ryo Hazuki in Shenmue. Shenmue for me is really something quite special. Not only do I get to be a part of something that I really love, but it's a part of gaming history. All the games that we know and love today, with massive open worlds and stunning detail, were built on the backs of games like Shenmue. Shenmue is a beautiful, unique experience that was way ahead of its time. On a more personal note, the story shaped me into the person that I am today. It taught me about friends, family, sacrifice, passion, and determination. But most important to me as a young man was approaching life as a martial artist with focus and discipline. Shenmue was a game changer, and somehow I get to live the dream of being a part of it, humbly and gratefully.
Any critique of Shenmue would be incomplete without a careful examination of how it played on original hardware. On the Dreamcast controller is where one of Shenmue's most fundamental and controversial aspects took place, the controls. Typically, the first thing that happens when a new player tries out Shenmue is that they try to move using the joystick.
Alright, so you
What
can control him.
is this? How do you move? With L?
This often results in a new player becoming disoriented.
Oh god! What have they done? Why is it like this?
As a small aside, something critics and new players often miss is that the genre of Shenmue is called Free, an acronym which stands for Fully Reactive Eyes Entertainment. It is not difficult to make the case that Shenmue was, in its day, a technically impressive, stunningly beautiful, and highly detailed game. Unlike most other video games where the main way to interact with the world is through the movement of a character's body, Shenmue is meant to be experienced primarily with your eyes. The most important part of playing Shenmue is the act of observing its detailed world, and the controls are designed with this in mind. Oftentimes, the only way to progress the story is by investigating the minutiae of your immediate surroundings. Movement of Ryo's body, accomplished via the directional pad, players tend to find cumbersome and his movements clumsy. I have to defend these tank controls as being intentional, and seriously, they really are not that bad. With a tiny bit of practice, they're hardly any trouble at all. The criticism is that these tank controls take you out of the game, but this could not be further from the truth. Tank controls actually enhance the idea of free, which intentionally prioritizes a player's eyes in the gameplay experience. This forces the player to move more deliberately so as to prevent mindlessly running about, missing all the little details surrounding you. Okay, yes, I know that Shenmue 3 replaced tank controls for more modern traversal through 3D space, but I still prefer the original control scheme of the old games. They require careful, deliberate movements from the player, and that kind of playstyle is central to Shenmue's core gameplay. During combat segments, the controls become more akin to a fighting game. This fighting system allows a small degree of button mashing. Ryo can string together a lengthy combo by simply spamming punch multiple times. Pressing kick 3 times performs another simple combo. However, since the combat system is based on the Virtua Fighter engine, the player must memorize a variety of simple command inputs in Ryo's move list, which, when taken all together, provides for a complex combat experience. While it is true that fights involving multiple enemies become clunky, as there is no reliable way to toggle between enemies, the difficulties stemming from these issues are mitigated through practice. This is all to say that nothing keeps the combat from being fun, and the player is usually left craving more fighting opportunities rather than being relieved that they are over.
If I could put into words what Shenmue means to me, I think it would be comfort. It's kind of a time capsule in more than one way. It's a time capsule for the 80s, and it's a time capsule for the time when I played it. And I played it when I was a really little kid, back when I didn't really worry about much in life. And I find that Shenmue has a way of kind of slowing down your mind. So when everything's kind of frantic in my life, things can get a little stressful, I find myself going to the Shenmue series.
Shenmue to me is not just a video game franchise. It pushed the envelope of what a video game could be, it challenged those expectations, and it became something much more, much greater, and became very a deep and emotional experience for me that ultimately the fandom that it generated within me would change my life forever. I would go on to become friends with a lot of people that are heavily involved in the game, such as Corey Marshall, who is the lead actor. He became one of my best friends. I got to be directly involved with the re-release and advising Sega on aspects of the Shenmue 1 and 2 re-release. I got to be involved heavily with Shenmue 3's promotion and release, and it's not only allowed me to experience a culture from afar, it allowed me to visit that culture in Japan specifically, and it's just been unbelievable to me, the opportunities that have come through it, and the amount of people that approach me asking me about my opinions of this game to this day still stuns me, because ultimately I am simply a fan, but it is not simply just a game.
Next, I would like to bring up a common criticism of Shenmue's primary gameplay, or, as critics would have us believe, the lack thereof.
The primary gameplay of Shenmue consists of walking around and asking people questions about stuff they usually don't know about.
To understand Shenmue's primary gameplay, one must understand the three main game modes of the experience: Free Quest Mode, Free Battle, and Quick Timer Events or QTEs. Free Battle Mode is the only part of the game in which Ryo can utilize throw moves. The ability to parry or dodge your opponent and follow up with a punishing counter move is something special. Showing this aspect of the game was not tacked on as a half measure. The combat, while harboring the tendency to be a bit sticky on occasion, is renowned for providing deep and satisfying engagement. In addition, the QTE segments are well made, even by today's standards. These allow the player to become an active participant in the scripted action of a cutscene, going beyond that of the typical passive cinematic cutscene experience all too common in video games. Since both of these game modes have aged decently, the culprit earning the lion's share of critical ire is Free Quest Mode. For this reason, I will spend a larger portion of time explaining it rather than the other two. The vast majority of Shenmue's gameplay is comprised of Free Quest Mode. As stated earlier, the game's controls and camera are designed around this specific mode. That this creative choice is intentional leads to the simple conclusion that Shenmue is not an action game. It is more like a point-and-click adventure set in a fully interactive 3D open world. Due to the realism of Shenmue's artistic design and culturally authentic setting, this creates something of a real-world simulation effect. Shenmue's core gameplay is in the act of observing and interacting with its highly detailed environments. At the very beginning of the game, right after the opening cutscenes, the player finds herself in Ryo's room. This setting is where an implicit tutorial takes place, teaching the player how to be rewarded for exploring minutiae. There is no order or set way in which a player must interact with the environment. But here is one possible scenario. As Ryo examines his room, the camera locks onto a lamp on his desk. By pressing a button, he switches on the light. This small reward invites the player to see what else on the desk is interactable. Ryo discovers a cassette tape. After briefly examining it, the tape gets added to Ryo's inventory. Soon the player makes the discovery that even the drawers of the desk can be opened. In the first drawer is discovered a portable tape cassette player. Now Ryo can listen to the tape he was just rewarded with. In the next drawer is a picture of Ryo with a bunch of other young people. One might infer that these are his friends. In the final drawer, Ryo finds another cassette tape. Without even leaving the first room of the game, Shenmue carefully teaches the fundamental premise central to its primary gameplay. Exploring minutiae leads to rewards. Further reinforcing this concept, there are a plethora of optional cutscenes that can be triggered on the first day within and around the Hazuki domicile. By examining food on the dinner table, reading a letter left in your father's office room, examining the bare cherry tree outside the dojo, or reading the wall hangings inside the dojo, the player is given multiple opportunities to be treated with short videos that flesh out Ryo's relationship to his father. In fact, it was under the cherry tree where Ryo first learned the Rimon Chochu, signature elbow strike of Virtua Fighter's Akira Yuki. More on that later. The point is that exploration is the main activity of the game. This is how the majority of the player's time is spent in Shenmue. This is how you play the game. This is cool.
This is cool.
This is also the primary way to progress the storyline, which leads us into another highly criticized aspect of the game, the pacing.
When I first started playing Shenmue and I saw the detail, I saw the approach, I saw the atmosphere, it made me want to dedicate and explore every single thing that it had going on, from characters to environments, to story plot. It really changed the way that I felt about gaming in general. It really changed the way that I felt about life. Growth, education, dedication, experience, love, exploration. That's what Shenmue means to me. That's what it has taught me.
I mean, open world setting, really living your life in that 3D environment, that was all talked about, discussed, and of course, launched with the release of the first Shenmue game. And when I got to experience that firsthand with playing the first Shenmue, it changed my perspective of what a video game itself can be. And it's actually exposed me to a lot of positivity. This game has definitely taught me that everyone can come together through struggles, through life, and really help each other to move forward.
Admittedly, Shenmue puts off a significant number of players within the first hour of the first disc. Many of them give up on the game altogether, complaining that Shenmue leaves the player with little or nothing to do and is thus boring.
When it's not routinely being annoying, Shenmue is just boring. No, shut up, it's boring. Boldness is no excuse for wasting the player's time, having absolutely no respect for the audience or its patience.
What kills this game for me is how you're constantly forced to just wait around for the next thing to happen.
And generally expecting people to make their own fun in a game that doesn't really give you all that many tools to have fun.
To be clear, Shenmue has no particular pace to which the player must adhere. The fact that you can take things as slowly as you want is one of the most novel aspects of the game. However, there is a limit to how quickly it allows you to progress the story, and this is where gamers lacking in patience become furious with Shenmue's pacing. It is this aspect that has led critics to accuse Shenmue of wasting the player's time by forcing her to wait in order to progress the plot.
There was a part where my only objective for that day was to go to the tattoo parlor and talk to the guy who runs it, so I get there.
It's closed.
So now I have to wait until 2 p.m. for it to open, so finally, the store opens.
Tomorrow at 3, wait at the arcade.
So now I have to walk home, go to bed. Oh wait, it's not late enough for me to sleep yet. So now I just stare into a corner until it's 8 p.m., go to sleep, get up at 8:30, and wait until 3 p.m. so I can play the rest of the game. This is dog shit game design.
As soon as someone begins to criticize Shenmue for this reason, I just shake my head ruefully because I know that the person just does not get the most crucial thing to understand about the game. The main point of Shenmue's gameplay is not to progress the plot.
What? What are you talking about?
Okay, well now, I know that seems like a controversial statement, but before you click the dislike button and stop watching, hear me out. I'm fully aware that the story is one of the main aspects of Shenmue that draws players in. Moreover, I acknowledge that the story may well be the reason that a significant number of players enjoy Shenmue in the first place. Although Shenmue's story may be the primary focus for many fans, if a person is playing just to get through the story as quickly as possible, then they are missing the whole point of what Shenmue is going for. But isn't Shenmue a story-centered game? How can anyone make the claim that the point of Shenmue is not to progress the story when it is such a narratively driven experience? Well, Shenmue's narrative is not developed in the traditional sense. While the main protagonist is Ryo Hazuki, the world in which he resides does not revolve around him as opposed to more typical video game heroes. The game doesn't go out of its way to make the player feel special in comparison to anyone else in the game. In Shenmue, much like in reality, the world does not conform to your schedule, but rather the player must adapt to the pace of the surrounding universe. In this way, Shenmue creates a uniquely immersive setting through the incorporation of a Taoist principle called Wu Wei, or the art of non-doing. Ryo's quest cannot be forced to progress by trying to aggressively rush through the game. This philosophy of game design is explicitly set forth to the player during a brief interaction at the beginning of Shenmue 2.
Why do rivers flow?
The river flows toward the ocean.
That is correct. Even the mightiest of rivers started with a drop of water. Water returns to the ocean, its mother.
The ocean, its mother.
I recommend you take your time. The river flows calmly. That's why it can flow so far.
Instead, the player is taught to learn the value of allowing things to progress at their natural pace, to go with the flow, to allow the spontaneous progression of the story through player action that is as unconscious of itself as one's own breathing. This is what sets Shenmue apart from other games to this day. The point of the game is this: to explore the minutiae of your environment and reap the rewards. Slowing down the pace of its story progression is intentional because furthering the plot is just one of a multitude of ways to reward the player for exploration. This is a game about collecting things like martial arts scrolls, cassette tapes, and capsule toys. It's about finding new foods for your cat, discovering optional cutscenes, finding optional free battles, optional side quests, perfecting the techniques in your moves list, and even filling out an NPC character bio that's so extensive it's basically a mini encyclopedia. This brings me to another point that I want to stress to people. The complete Shenmue experience has not been fully preserved over time, and I'm not even talking about all the cool VMU images that existed that you could put on your VMU memory card. Look at this, the oft-overlooked 4th disc called the Shenmue Passport Disc. Many online features made available by the Passport Disc are not accessible in the ports of Shenmue to newer consoles or platforms. Thankfully, there is now an app called the Suka Pass that helps to restore much of this experience. Talking to NPCs, it turns out, is not pointless because it unlocks these characters' bios as a reward on the Passport Disc. From this, you can glean all sorts of things about Shenmue's world, like why Ryo is cold towards females, why Nozomi is in love with Ryo in the first place, and the tragic backstory of Setsu Abe, who was separated from her husband during the Second World War and has made dinner for two every night for decades, just in case he returns. This function actually creates a purpose in speaking with every single NPC in the game. But the point is this: there are loads of things to do with your free time in the game. When asked to wait until a certain time before moving the story forward, this should be thought of as an opportunity to partake in your favorite diversions. And yes, typically the way you progress the game's story is by talking to a string of people.
It starts you out with an insipid series of missions that are just go talk to this person, then 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 come back tomorrow and talk to this person, then come back tomorrow and talk to this person, then talk to this person, then talk to this person.
Some have harshly criticized this, but finding each individual NPC required by the plot provides justification for exploring every corner of Shenmue's detailed world. This activity represents not the ends, but the means for Shenmue's primary gameplay. Now, if you fail to be in the right place at the right time, to talk to the right person, the penalty may be that you must wait until the next day to try again. This is a very stress-free penalty, especially compared to the frustration of video games of the past that force players to start from the beginning once they ran out of lives or continues. If it happens that you are waiting around for an inordinately long period, it is just because you didn't efficiently manage the time given to explore the details around you to discover the next clue. I often hear about how the pacing of Shenmue's first disc, especially the first day, is bad, even from fans of the series. The argument is that intentional mundanity for its own sake kills the pacing of a game and makes it less enjoyable. This is a point that I feel is unfair because it ignores a major purpose accomplished by the mundanity: establishing real-world logic. Take, for instance, the Sakura Goaoka segment of the first day. In this area, the game continues teaching how to interact with and progress in Shenmue's world. The player has no idea where to go at this point. It is possible to go around knocking on every door in the neighborhood, but it won't get you anywhere. Besides, what kind of weirdo would do that in real life? Good afternoon, sir. Have you heard the good word of Shenmue from our prophet Yu Suzuki? As you approach the Abe store, a cutscene is triggered in which an old woman asks for help finding the Yamamoto house. Each home has a name plaque with a resident name. She tells you that she will be waiting for you at the park. Again, you could go about looking at every single plaque in the neighborhood, but this will probably not get you anywhere either. As you walk towards the park the old woman mentioned, possibly to see if she can give you another hint, you notice a map. It shows where you are, and look at that! The Yamamoto house is immediately to your left. Easy to find with the map. Returning to the Abe store brings a young man working on his motorcycle into view. He is recognizable from the photo found earlier as one of Ryo's friends. Maybe this can help in Ryo's quest. Eventually, Ryo gets directed to talk to Sumiya-san and Yamagishi-san. Don't know where they live? No problem, because now you know to check a local map. This small activity of using maps to find people and places is an exercise of real-world logic. If you have a challenge in the game, how would you solve it in real life? Need the phone number for warehouse number 8? In real life, I would probably look for the phone book near my phone. Look at that. You can actually do that in the game. Boy, it's too dark to see in this room. What would I do in real life? Well, probably go to the store and buy a light bulb. Wow, you can literally do that too. Shenmue is constantly blurring the line between video games and the real world by prioritizing real-world logic over classic RPG video game logic. And it teaches the player to do this by engaging her in the mundane. This is no small feat, even by today's standards.
When Shenmue 1 came out, I was already a young adult. I was probably 20 years old at the time when I started playing, but it was unlike anything I've ever played up to that point. It was insane. I could go anywhere I wanted to, I could open any drawer and look at any item. It was really, really something else, and it really made a huge impact.
Shenmue has changed my life. Since I first played it with my brother when I was young, I just thought it was the most unbelievable thing I've ever seen. The video game, it doesn't even strike me as a video game. It was an experience. It was a feeling. It was passion. It was highs. It was lows. It was the most groundbreaking video game I've ever come across. And since day one, it honestly has just motivated me. I love the characters, I love the storyline, I love the life lessons that you can learn from Shenmue, and it doesn't matter how many times I play it, it's still equally as magical every single time. My love for the game, I just cannot put into words. It's a truly life-changing game.
Alright, time to talk about the way all of these elements weave together into one cohesive experience. The game design, if you will. I have heard it said that due to the slow pace of Shenmue, players often just let Ryo stare at a wall while they play on their phones or put the controller down to run some errands. As we previously observed, the core gameplay of Shenmue is not centered on advancing the plot. The continuation of its engaging storyline is a secondary result, almost a side effect, of the game's central mechanic, exploring minutia. If you just stand around in Shenmue until it's time to progress the story, then you are simply playing the game wrong. As an aside, I know that people these days bristle when gamers are the ones blamed for not enjoying a game, rather than considering the game itself to be deficient in some way, but allow me to explain, it is possible to play a game wrong, especially when playing it in a way other than its original intention results in less enjoyment for the player. Take Nintendo's Super Mario Bros. For example. If one were to play Mario and refuse to press the jump button, it would result in crashing into enemies, falling down chasms, and being unable to progress in the game. If one refuses to press the jump button in a game about jumping, then would not the player be at fault rather than the game? Perhaps the player dislikes 2D platformers altogether. That's fine, but keep in mind that just because a game is not to a player's taste does not automatically mean that said game is not good. So if in Shenmue, a game primarily about exploring minutia, one refuses to use idle time to explore the detailed environmental surroundings, it could be said that Shenmue is being played wrong. I think it's safe to say that if a person just waits around doing nothing, letting Ryo stare at the wall of his bedroom, playing around on your phone or running errands while waiting until it's time for the next story beat, that person is playing Shenmue all wrong. Well, if just staring at the wall is the wrong way to play the game, what should the player do then? Let me give you a small example of how Shenmue rewards the gameplay mechanic of exploring minutia. Suppose you decide to pass the time by visiting the Hazuki Dojo. As you peruse the details of this large room, you will eventually look at some Japanese calligraphy hanging on the wall, which signifies the 8 principles of yin and yang. Ryo says,
"I can't reach it."
As you continue to look around, you notice a stool. By locking onto it with the camera, Ryo moves it in place so that now the calligraphy hanging is reachable. Behind it, you find a mysterious scroll covered in Chinese characters. Shenmue is chocked full of rewards waiting for players to discover through their exploration. Maybe somebody you already know or have yet to meet in the game can translate this scroll. If you choose to continue exploring this thread, how far will it go? This, I propose, is how Shenmue is primarily meant to be played. And look, I'm really not trying to pick on anyone who is critical of the game. I have chosen clips from these particular journalists and influencers because I feel that they best represent general misconceptions about Shenmue that I usually encounter on the internet. Game Dunkey is a hilarious content creator and I'm actually a fan of his. I'm sure that Jeff Gersman is a decent guy who really cares about the industry he works in. Jim Sterling, well, he tends to purposely lean into controversy. It's kind of his whole deal. None of this is personal, I just feel the need to point out that people who criticize this game that either don't understand or refuse to play it as intended are not exactly what I would consider within the realm of fair critique. As such, I have no choice but to shrug off their critical arguments as invalid. There is one thing critics are generally correct about when referring to Shenmue. It does lean quite a bit on nostalgia. However, the way it incorporates this into the main game actually works in its favor. Please humor me for yet another example. Take something as seemingly inconsequential to the game's central unifying theme as the U Arcade. Sure, by exploring the arcade, the player is rewarded with different minigames to play, some of them classic Yu Suzuki arcade titles. Isn't this just an exercise in complete nostalgic diversion for its own sake? It turns out while these arcade activities seem pointless to the progression of the game, they are actually in themselves a form of training. There are your obvious examples like Excite QTE and QTE Title, each serving to hone the player's reflexes for future QTE segments. Perhaps one could argue that playing darts teaches the player to wait patiently for the right moment to strike, also serving to train the player's reflexes. Fine, but what about Space Harrier? This has nothing to do with Shenmue at all. It's a rail shooter about a guy in a brown leather jacket chasing after an elusive green dragon. Nothing at all like Shenmue, in which you play as a guy in a brown leather jacket chasing after an elusive villain who stole your father's dragon mirror. Oh wait. Also, the Hang-On game is secretly training you to race against opponents and the clock, which will serve you well in upcoming forklift races and daily quotas. Most of all, Hang-On serves perfectly as the setup for the ultimate payoff: the late-night motorcycle race to save Ryo's true love, Nozomi, from a villainous gang of harbor thugs. Shenmue is so carefully constructed that things as innocuous as arcade games actually play a subliminal role in psychologically pulling the player into ever deeper levels of immersion. Using nostalgia for this purpose isn't just good game design, it's absolutely brilliant. This is one of the most appealing aspects of the game for me, and it leads in well to the greatest nostalgic payoff of all, something I call the Virtua Fighter factor.
Everything about Shenmue ticked all the right boxes of what I liked about video games. It was a fighting game like Street Fighter, a beat-em-up like Final Fight, an adventure game like The Legend of Zelda, and its cinematic exploration and puzzle style even resembled Resident Evil. But more than that, Shenmue felt like one of those classic movies you can always go back to. Movies with endearing characters and locations. I loved it. And I loved it when I started it with my little brother for the first time, who was in elementary school at the time. And now I love it as I share it with my 2 daughters. They're intrigued by Ryo doing mundane things like walking past a koi pond, petting a kitten, or drinking a can of soda. Shenmue is the best.
It's a journey that just meant so much that no other game has touched me in that way. You know, it's a thing about tangibility and relatability, and Shenmue has really been a great coming of age story, if not one of the greatest. And I think, you know, as we're going along on this journey with Ryo, we're also not only learning more about Ryo, but we're learning a lot more about ourselves. And I think the greatest part of Shenmue is the self-reflection and the introspective nature of the game and how it approaches life. You know, it's a video game, but it's more than a video game.
Almost everywhere you look, Shenmue is bursting at the seams with nostalgic Sega references. Far from using this to rest on its laurels, Shenmue incorporates nostalgia into its core game design by using it as yet another reward for exploring the world around Ryo. By far the largest payoff a player receives in this regard are nods to the Virtua Fighter universe. To fully understand what Shenmue is going for, you need to understand that Shenmue was originally intended as a Virtua Fighter RPG, The Legend of Akira. I actually made a video all about it if you're interested, links in the description. As such, Shenmue is secretly a prequel of sorts to the Virtua Fighter series, well known for sticking to a minimalistic storyline found nowhere in the games themselves. More particularly, Yu Suzuki and his team designed Shenmue as a prequel with the purpose of fleshing out the backstory of Virtua Fighter poster boy Akira Yuki. Watching Ryo learn new techniques and progress as a martial artist gives players a tantalizing glimpse into how Akira became the Hakyokukin master he is renowned as today. Keeping this in mind creates a strong incentive for exploring the rich world of Shenmue. Seeing a reference to the martial arts techniques or characters from Virtua Fighter in Shenmue is an exciting way to reward players with insights into the Virtua Fighter universe. The move scrolls, NPCs, capsule toys, and the plot of Shenmue are all in service to this end. This brilliant combination of elements around a central theme is one of the biggest reasons why I love it so much. After saying all this, the reason Shenmue is so important to me is that after playing through the first game, it made me feel like I had changed as a person. It pushed the limits of the gaming industry and challenged the notion of what a video game could be in a way that I will never forget as long as I live. There may not be one specific thing that stands out as a singular reason to play Shenmue, but that's okay. Its components create an experience that is greater than the sum of its parts. As players, we are able to participate in Ryo's life in an intimate way thanks to the simulation elements of the gameplay. We experience his hopelessness and frustration when faced with the challenge of unraveling the mystery of his father's murder. The ennui of a youth trapped within the mundanity of daily life in a port town of 1980s Japan. The beautiful sorrow Ryo finds himself incapable of articulating, further alienating him from friends, family, and ultimately resulting in the unrequited love between himself and Nozomi, all combined to make Shenmue's experience something that transcends that of a mere game. We participate in the excitement felt as Ryo learns the esoteric wisdom of Eastern philosophy associated with martial arts. His journey, Akira's journey, became our own in an experience so exquisitely unique as to render it inimitable by other games to this day, even by the likes of the Yakuza series. This is why Shenmue was always good, and still is.
Shenmue has always been a huge part of my life. When I was young, the lessons in Shenmue taught me the basics of humanity and culture. It led me down a path of loving nature more than anything else. Shenmue opened my mind at such a young age, which led to many amazing events in my life. In these current days, Shenmue acts as a beautiful memory to look upon whenever I need help getting past the troubles of life. It is the factor I keep to continue feeling inspired to do the best I can. Without it, I would not be the person I am today.
To me, Shenmue was always good because I think a lot of games haven't really reached the pinnacle of detail that Shenmue has exhibited over the years. A lot of detail and so much atmosphere, something that hasn't been captured in a lot of games lately. Many games attempt it, but they haven't succeeded. And it means so much to me because it was at a time when I was growing up. It was a gift from my mother. It was the only game that actually made her stand there in awe, staring at the screen because the graphics were so amazing and the characters looked so lifelike. It was really cool. I love the game so much, and I'm hoping to see it continue.
I really do love Shenmue a lot. That whenever I get in a bad mood, I play Shenmue. It's the only thing that makes me calm. Also, I cannot wait for Shenmue 4 to be released, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be amazing.
If you made it to the end, I want to thank you so much for watching. Big thanks to everybody who contributed in the video. This video took me a long time to make, and it's been an honor and a privilege to be able to work with so many other passionate fans that love this series as much or even more than I do. The love of the fans is what brought this series back from the dead, and the love of the fans will see this series through to its completion. I have been your humble friendmoo, Segalacious, encouraging you to hold on to hope. Keep fighting the good fight, the virtue of fight. Take care.